Joe is a 29-year-old PT based in Surrey. He's suffered with anxiety and depression for a large portion of his life, especially through the ages of 18 to 19. Joe is involved with a few mental health charities, but one in particular in the Grace Deer Trust, which is very close to his heart. On the podcast, we're going to be discussing my personal experiences and Joe's experiences on how to deal with anxiety and depression. I, like many men, can relate to these issues, and this is the main reason I invited Joe on the podcast to talk today. First of all, I just wanted to discuss the main reason I brought you on, and we touched on it before, but in terms of having male role models, that was huge, because I didn't feel like I had anyone I could look up to personally when I was going through stuff, and that was kind of one of the main reasons why I'm doing what I am doing, and this is the path I've chosen. And I know we touched on it briefly before, but I know yours is quite similar to why I'm doing that as well.
Yeah, I think certainly growing up with three sisters actually didn't help that, because I got on with them better than my dad, and he wasn't particularly involved with that, and it wasn't really spoken about. So certainly growing up with a more female-dominated family certainly meant that the girls kept themselves and they could understand each other better, and I sort of had an understanding of not being able to talk about it, or I think it all came too late for me. I think when I turned sort of 18, 19, that's when it started to come to a head, whereas before that I didn't have any idea about mental health or the stigma around that, or anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. And it all sort of hit me at once. So there's certainly the male role model thing. I had no one to turn to. I felt like I couldn't anyway. And a bit like yourself, I think you just grew up with understanding of either not being able to speak about it or not knowing the right things to say. And certainly the man up thing was just a huge thing, especially back then.
For sure.
So yeah, it was the sort of man up, get on with it type thing. Girls don't have that.
I completely agree with that. I think for me as well was I felt so awkward trying to talk about it, in terms of I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't understand why I was feeling so depressed at 16. So mine spiked around 16 to 17, I just finished in a relationship, and I felt like everything was just going wrong in my life. But when I look back at it, I just think I held so many emotions in, especially from, I'd say about 12 onwards. I had a few things happen to me. So for example, my mum had breast cancer, and that really hit me for 6. But I kind of didn't realise that at the time when I was going through these things, and it was only until more and more added up, I just sort of burst at about 16, 17. I didn't really know what was going on, didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to sort it. And as soon as I did start talking about it, and I opened up to my family, I was like, listen, I'm really struggling. I had some time out of school. I moved school for sixth form. Probably wasn't the best idea looking back at it for my mental health, but in terms of that, talking to my family and having a close knit group of friends for me was enormous. And I just worked through it every day, chipped through it, and here I am now. And in a way, I'm sort of glad I went through that experience to the point where I can help people today. But in terms of role models, like you touched on before, I didn't really have anyone. I look up to my dad massively, and I look up to my brother as well. And those were two role models for me, and just the way they conduct themselves and stuff like that. And for me, that's kind of the way I wanted to model myself around getting through my mental health, was being able to talk to my dad, my brother, my mum and stuff, and learn from them and go from there.
Yeah, it's similar, but also quite different to me. Every male model I've had in my life has always sort of let me down in one way or other. So my dad and I don't have a great deal in common other than sport, and that's obviously we'll touch on that later, as the sports side of things is massive. Yeah. But so my mum remarried, and he wasn't a nice man at all, and it was a lot of my stuff is trauma based around him. Yeah. So older men have either come into my life and let me down. So therefore I've often my mum is, I've often said this before to her, is my mum saved my life. Definitely, if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be here. So my mum and my three sisters have been a massive sort of massive thing for me, and a coup to sort of keep me going. So it's nice for you that the men in your life have helped you through that and sort of steered you down the right path, whereas I sort of learned the hard way. I've sort of looked at their behaviour, who I've had in my life, and have gone, that's how I don't want to be. And it took me a long, long time to realise that, but I think watching their behaviour turned me into a bit of a monster at times, and certainly when you're 16 to 18, you could put it down to sort of male hormones and growing up in a female-dominated environment and being a bit of a testosterone-filled idiot. But actually, I think a lot of that was down to sort of not being able to compartmentalise how I felt, and it often sort of turned into rage, and which is again coming back to what we'll talk about later, is sport has really helped me as well. Being
Yeah.
able to sort of channel that into playing rugby or whatever it is. So that's definitely helped me for sure.
For those who don't know, obviously I met you through rugby, and we can touch on that now. Actually, is rugby is, for me, is not just a sport. It's taught me routine. It's taught me discipline. It's taught me how to control anger. It's everything to me in terms of how I've grown as a person. And I think that's so underrated with sport in particular, is you're not just throwing a ball around with your mates. And it's such an out for me in terms of sort of escaping my own problems for
100%.
a couple hours,
100%.
being with my friends, having a reset.
Yeah.
And I think over recent years as well, you know, I've been playing down at Brunel in the Trailfinder Senior Academy, and it's been good. It's been good, and it's an out being with the boys every day, and it sort of distracts you from your mental health problems.
100%.
And I think this is massive and it goes back to a point of like physical health coincides with your mental health, in my
100%.
opinion.
Yeah.
And just doing those things and getting out has been massive for my mental health. But we obviously met through a friend of mine, Chris Stegman. I went down to Reeds Weybridge Rugby Club where you play. Just talk about Reeds and how that's helped you in terms of your mental health. And
I think a lot of the things you just touched on in terms of physically, it's obviously amazing for you, and the mental side that comes with that is just the biggest boost you can gain. But for me, it was more social, because I really struggled on the social side of things growing up. I didn't go to a lot of parties, and I don't drink, so growing up not drinking was a huge thing. And I think there's a massive stigma around rugby and drink, especially. But
there is.
growing up at going to sort of 16 to 18 birthday parties and not really drinking, and having sort of PTSD as a result of getting drunk when I was sort of 16 to 18, the knock-on effect that booze had on me was massive. So not drinking and playing rugby was huge. But I think socially it was massive for me. I think being around a group of guys who, for the most part, were pretty accepting of the fact that I didn't do that, and I just got on with it. And I think maybe between the age of 16 to 21, once you start saying no to going to parties and going to gatherings with your mates, they just stop inviting you, and they don't really understand that the reason why you don't want to go is because you really suffer in social environments, and that actually crowds can be really overwhelming. I'm sort of very sort of, for the word, sensory sensitive. So like if it's too loud or too many crowds there, I really battle, and I'd still do to a certain extent now. So to come back to it, rugby's really helped me just create a safe space for me to go, not only physically exercise, but also be around other sort of like-minded people in that sense, who sort of really take me in. And that's where Reeds have been amazing, is they've really sort of not taken me under their wing, but they've really accepted me that I am sort of neurodiverse, and I do have sort of my quirks, and I don't really drink that much at all. So that for me has been the biggest thing for me. I can't thank them enough for being really understanding about that, and that's been amazing. It's taken a while, but it's been awesome.
Yeah, they're good blokes.
Yeah, good bunch.
Good blokes. Yeah, I was obviously down there like 3 or 4 times, and very welcoming guys, and very switched on guys as well, which is good. No, it's a good crowd being down there. Yeah. In terms of not drinking, see, this is something I try, and I reckon I go through. You know, I'm trying to think how long it was. I think I did about 2 months, which doesn't sound a long time now. I'm saying that of not drinking, and it was more just, I don't know. I felt, for me, not drinking was amazing, but at the same time, I go out to rugby events and stuff, and everyone else is battered. It's
impossible not to.
But you're on like a different wavelength to everyone else if you don't. Yeah. And I was a bit like, what do I do? Do I have a couple? Then a couple turns to like 7 or 8, and then 7 or 8 turns to stumbling into an Uber at 3 in the morning, and then I'm back in the same cycle again. And I think now I've finished uni, so I graduated 2 weeks ago now. I think now I'm going to give it a proper go of, if I am drinking, not drinking every Wednesday like we were doing, and Saturday. But for me, I think, for someone who I like to have a drink. I wouldn't say it's like my go-to, but in a social situation, it is nice just to have a couple, whether it's with your family at dinner. So I think what I'm going to try, and this is something I was thinking about and talking about with my dad, was just having maybe like once every 2 weeks, like a little social drink, but not doing what I always do. Because when I go, I'm always like, nah, it's all right, like, I'll be fine. I'll do a couple drinks, and like I said earlier, it gets out of control very quickly. And you know, I think that comes down to feeling a bit socially awkward in those situations.
That's fair enough,
and sort of now I'm better understanding myself and I'm helping others better understand themselves. Just sort of being back in control of those situations and realizing like you don't need to impress people, like you need to be selfish sometimes. That was big for me, just sort of wanting to impress others and be like, oh, lad, but you don't need to be like that. You can just have a good time without having to drink.
And equally as well, it's having everything in moderation. So like it's like telling someone to stop eating bad food. It's just not feasible. So I think it's by all means have a drink, have a beer at a dinner or a glass of wine with your girlfriend or whatever. If you have to go, there's no harm in that. Like and sometimes some people need to have that at the end of a long day. Like some people need that to sort of unwind, and there's nothing against that. I would never sort of preach to any of my clients that they shouldn't be drinking or shouldn't be having chocolate and stuff, because it's just not realistic, right? So I think everything in moderation. I just know that if I was to drink, the days following that are pretty miserable. So I either don't, or I'll allow myself, to sort of a glass of red at dinner or something with the missus or whatever. So, but that for me is huge. That's massive for me as well.
You talked about obviously not drinking. What other success stories do you think you've had in terms of things that have helped your mental health and your physical health in a way? Obviously.
I think. Sounds really cliche, but definitely going to the gym regularly has really helped me. Having a routine, in general, I think, whether it be sleep, gym, work, life, everything. I think routine has been like the massive saviour for me, and that covers all bases. I think eating relatively well. Again, I've come back to moderation. I'm not really strict. I mean, you see what I eat on a daily basis. It's pretty horrendous. I'm not too strict on myself, and nor will I ever be. But having a routine in place, that definitely helps me. And therefore, if I go outside those lines, sometimes I won't punish myself, because I know that the day after or that afternoon, I'm going to be going to the gym or playing rugby, training with my mates and stuff. And actually, walking has been one of the best things to me. I know that you're big on your walking. Like walking for me has been the best thing. Like. And weirdly, I saw it on your platform a couple of weeks ago. It was like leaving your phone at home, because I've got so programmed to take my phone everywhere with me, and I'm like, that's my lifeline. I'm not going to do without it. But if I can go an hour or two, whether it be a podcasting or not, I'll sometimes just leave it at home and just walk. And that for me has been a huge, like weather depending, obviously. Like in the UK, I'm not guaranteed anything, but certainly this time of year, getting out for an hour, going for a walk has been genuinely amazing, and it really helps me.
I'm the exact same. So one of the posts, if you don't follow me on Instagram or whatnot, one of the posts I did was it was my girlfriend who told me to do this. She realised when I got really stressed out, obviously with my ADHD and anxiety, I doom scroll for hours, but I don't realise I'm doing it. And she's like, Tom, like, she's so understanding. I adore that girl, and she's so helpful with everything that's going on for me mentally. But she's like, you need to get off your phone for a bit, let's go for a walk. And then we did it the first time. I just left my phone at home. I felt so much happier. It's such like a easy thing to do, but it sounds so silly. Just leave your phone at home and go.
We're so used to being on the whole time, exactly. Right? It's not actually that easy.
And then I looked at my screen time. I was averaging like 7 hours a day on my phone, and I was like,
that's 7 nothing compared to a lot of people as well.
Yeah, and I was just like, that's nuts. So for me, when I'm stressed out, a few of the posts I've done, a cold shower, 2 minutes max. That's huge for me as well. And then walks without my phone. I just do like 40-45 minutes. Like, I think over the last year, being comfortable in my own mind has been huge for me. And this is what I'm trying to teach people as well, is you got to learn to be comfortable in your own mind, because your mind's the only thing at the end of the day you can control. And being able to be in your own mind without a distraction, just walking around, like enjoying what's around you, that was massive for me. And now I've got in a good habit of doing that, and I'm sort of incorporating that into runs. So my girlfriend always runs, she doesn't run with music in, she's a big runner, so she'll run like 15k and then come back. But that's like her peace of mind. And I've started trying to do that, and I suck at running. I'm awful at it. But in terms of just, it's so simple, just being off your phone. Like it can be so toxic on social media. You see stuff like people dying, or people just like, abusive comments to other people. And I've had a few things on my post, nothing bad, where I'm a bit like, did you need to comment that?
Also, you can read too much into it, and you can really take it to heart.
Exactly, and then I start overthinking.
It's like in your sort of GCSEs or A-levels, if you've got 11 grades and you get one bad one, you're not focusing on the 10 that are good, you're focusing on one that's not as good. So that's that we as sort of human beings are inherently bad at that, is focusing on the negative and the positive. And I think, and in general, like, social media can be a great place, as you're finding out, is reaching out to people and helping people through platforms can be amazing. However, the other side of it is, most of it's not real. Like, and I'm guilty of this as well, is a lot of my social media stuff is I'm very lucky. I'm lucky enough to go on holidays and be with my family a lot. A lot of that is just people can see that you're away a lot and they think that you have this amazing lifestyle and that you're jet setting around the world and stuff. And that's not true.
Exactly.
But what they don't see is the other 99% of that is that you can be miserable, sad, and the ones that actually portray the best lifestyles are the ones who actually aren't as happy. So that's what I've learned, and I'm sort of getting better at sort of leaving the social media side alone and not reading too much into the lifestyles of other people, because you can get so drawn into that, particularly young people growing up.
Yeah, social media is like me and my brother discussed this. It must have been about 6 months ago now. Is we both deleted Instagram and we gave that a go, and we did it for about 3 weeks, and then it's hard. Like when everything is on a platform like that, everyone you know, people sending you DMs, people, posting photos. You just feel so out of the loop that you can't really delete it, and it's something I'm still trying to figure out, because I still do it every day, like the doom scrolling. But now I'm aware of it. It's been so helpful, because now I'm like, oh no, I'm doing this again. Let's put the phone down. Let's go out. Let's try something new. And I think just the awareness around that. Sometimes you don't realise. I generally scrolled for 2 hours one day and had no idea. Like 2 hours was gone like that. Done.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah, and I had no clue. But yeah, that's been massive for me as well, putting the phone away, walks.
And I think a lot of that comes back to, and there'll be a theme of routine throughout the whole thing we'll be talking about, is I think it's setting yourself a goal of having under a certain amount of hours per week, and if that means having a 45-minute scroll at the end of each evening when you get into bed, and you've sort of, getting in for the night and going to sleep and whatever, like setting yourself times to be able to be on your phone. Otherwise you shouldn't be on it. No, it's not that you can't be on your phone at all, because certainly with my work I need to be on my phone a lot. It's just communicating with clients and stuff. But I think otherwise I spend, a bit like you, I spend so many hours scrolling through nothing, and I've gained zero from it. So I think it's being strict on myself to be able to tell myself I'm going to learn to play an instrument, I'm going to learn to learn a language, that kind of thing, is being proactive with your time rather than getting home and your first thought to go through your phone and scroll through TikTok, Instagram, all the things that you're gaining absolutely zero from. But at the same time not being too strict on yourself that you're only not doing those things, that makes sense. So I think it's just, again, it's a balance thing, and also almost teaching yourself a new routine.
Completely agree. Touch on something we talked about just before we went on the pod, was the Grace Deer Trust. I know this is something that is very close to your heart, and we talked briefly on it, but I'd love to hear the background on that and what we could do to support it.
So I met Karen, who is the mum of the charity, I guess you could say, through the gym I used to work at. And I was sort of handed her, as it were, as a new client, and we got on like a house on fire immediately. She's like my second mum. And very tragic, she lost her daughter Grace to suicide, and as a result the Grace Deer Trust, so Karen's daughter, unfortunately, so she took her own life, and she'd been battling for years and years and years with mental health and eating disorders and whatnot. And I grew very, very fond of the entire family, but most of all Karen and what she stood for, and she was just the most amazing thing, genuinely, that has happened to me for a very long time. And it's only changed my life, because it definitely made me sort of think about things and the battles that I've certainly come to terms with. And I've worked closely with them since basically their inception, so since the whole thing started, and it's been amazing, and I'll do anything for them. I've actually brought them into Reeds Weybridge, so we've sort of collaborated as a rugby club and a mental health charity to basically work together, because they recognise that to help the local community is getting in through schools, but also sports teams as well, because the two just go hand in hand, right? It's amazing how many people you wouldn't know are going through a really, really rough time that seemingly on the surface, look, who came back to earlier, surface have everything, and that have come from very privileged backgrounds, like you and I are very lucky to have had. So they in Elmbridge are doing everything in their power to, and they're quite small, they're a very, very small charity, unlike the big sort of Mind, and which, they're doing amazing work as well, but certainly in terms of the local community that I work within, they are just doing the most amazing, like, groundbreaking stuff possible. They're just insane. I love that.
As a PT, would you say there's sort of anything you do in particular to help your clients in terms of mental health, or is that something you look into? Because obviously you talked about
so I think behind most people that are doing physical exercise, there's often a reason as to why they're doing it. So people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, most of my clients, is you actually become more of a therapist than you are a trainer to them. You end up sharing a lot of things with me, and I'm happy to do that, which again we'll touch on what I want to get into as well, what I want to sort of go down the lines of going into my own sort of therapy, which we'll touch on later. But certainly there's often a reason as to why people are exercising, and it's not just physical. It's often to sort of battle demons they might have had from a previous life. Again, with you and I, right? You exercise not just for the physical, but obviously what's going on upstairs as well. So yeah, I think it's learning to listen and share and not so much give advice on, because most of them are grown adults and they can sort of, they know themselves better than I know them, certainly. But I think it's just learning to listen and sort of delve a bit deeper without getting too deep into their situations as to why they're doing what they're doing. And it's amazing that if you just have a platform to be able to, share with someone and they trust you enough, it's amazing what they'll tell you, and amazing what people, again, that seemingly have everything, that actually don't, and that they are really battling every day, just like you and I are. So
yeah, I completely agree. And we touched on before, and these are sort of like the 5 pillars of mental health, which people say, and what I think as well. And one of the main ones for me is exercise. So we got sleep, nutrition, mindfulness, exercise, communication. And exercise for me, I think everyone's different, and everyone's got to find their own way. And when people say exercise, you automatically think like go to the gym, like bench press, long run. But that's not the case. Like we touched on earlier, like a small walk, a 30-minute walk, just get out, just be in your own mind, get out, be in your own mind. And once, twice a week, it doesn't have to be a lot, but that's twice as many times as you were going to do before, and then just build on it. And I wrote an article which I released yesterday on small steps, and especially for me with ADHD, is taking small steps in these situations in terms of exercise and whatnot. If you haven't done it before, it can be as little as wake up, put on your running clothes, go brush your teeth, get outside, start walking. It doesn't have to. I think when people think exercise and they haven't exercised before, they think of this huge step, but it doesn't have to be that. You can start off so small. You could just get outside, go for a quick walk. If you have a dog, take the dog out. Just go enjoy yourself. It doesn't have to be like a hard thing. It doesn't have to be a stressful thing. If you're not enjoying it, then you can figure something else out and try a different avenue.
100% is one of the most poignant videos I've seen on your platform is when you were having a really, really shit day beforehand, like a really, really bad day, and you told yourself you'd go, I think it was clean your room, tidy room, tidy mind type thing, and go do some exercise, and that literally boosted your entire day thereafter. And what was started off as a really rubbish day, and you were having a really low mood, and you thought you hadn't resound yourself to have a bad day thereafter. It was like, what can I do to make myself feel a bit better in the situation? And that was to spend an hour, 10, 15 minutes, no matter what time it is, just tidying something. And that automatically has a huge impact on you, beneficially in terms of your brain, and also getting out exercising had a huge impact on you. And that, for me, was something I can really, really relate to, is doing these little things, these little steps, as you put it, can make the biggest difference. A little goes a long way type thing. It's like these little things here and there don't take a lot of time and effort, but actually mentally they're actually quite hard to do sometimes, because all you want to do is get in your duvet, get in bed, and feel sorry for yourself, order bad food, and it's that constant repetitive cycle, right?
It is. And I think I did that for so many years. And I think this is the reason why I wanted to do what I'm doing now and trying to help people, is I never thought I would do this. I never truly knew what I wanted to do. I loved the idea of having my own business and all those. I never thought I'd go into the mental health space until one day I was just like, I could help someone here, because I posted something on my story. Someone replied, a good friend of mine, I won't name him, and he was like, mate, I've been really struggling, and this really helped me. And I was a bit like, I can do this. I feel like this is my purpose, in terms of I've gone through what I've been through to help people like this. And what the point you said on, just wanting to get in your duvet and, just do nothing. I did that for so many years, and I sort of I let my own mind just trap me in a way, and I wouldn't want to wake up in the morning, and I just want to lie in bed all day. I had no motivation. I felt sad all day. I could never understand why. But I think when I look back at it, is I didn't try. If that makes sense. I let it happen. And then it was so hard. It was one of the hardest things I've done. But little things, just like the small steps I keep coming back to, of getting out of bed when you feel like that, making your bed, getting a cold shower, and just the small steps add up so quickly.
Massively so.
And then you start to take back control of your mind slowly. And now I'm at a point where I feel so in control, where I know if something's coming, I know what to do. And I think that's what I'm trying to show to people is don't let it trap you. Don't be like me.
Yeah.
Because it was awful, and I'm sure you've had a similar experience where you don't want to wake up some days.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's just holding yourself accountable for that, realizing your brain's trying to say no, and combating it, just going for it, being like, yes, I am going to do this now. I am going to read 5 pages of this book. Only 5 pages. I'm going to do it. When your brain's like, no, doom scroll. And I think that's, that's been massive as well. And another point I wanted to mention was you want to become a counsellor further down the line. And I think that's an awesome idea because obviously you've been through a lot of stuff. Do you think your experiences of what you've been through has sort of spiked you wanting to become a counsellor and help the younger people?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I think I joked about it earlier, is that with my job you become more of a counsellor than you do a trainer. I mean, that's obviously a bit tongue-in-cheek, but a lot of it's true. You listen and talk as much as you do train, because you spend a lot of time with these people. If you're seeing them 3 or 4 days a week, that's more than they see some of their friends and families, right? Which is quite sad, but it's true. I think through my experience having therapy as well, I've had, I think, 4 or 5 therapists in my life, and certainly through seeing someone like that. I mean, one of my absolute like demigods that I look up to most is a woman called Nikki Anstey, who I saw who's a hypnotherapist. And if you told me I was going to hypnotherapy a couple of years ago, I'd have laughed at you, saying like, yeah, I would literally have laughed at the door. I've been like, no way, like it's so hokey, it's for complete like whatever. But my mum literally said, you're going to therapy again. Like you need to go, and because I can't do this anymore, Joe. Like you're vegetating in bed, you're being wasted. You can't see how much you could be giving to people, how like important you are to not just the family, but like how much people love you. I just couldn't see it. I was like, had no value whatsoever. So she like dragged me to this therapist. She took me to Guildford, saw Nikki, and I was hooked. And it wasn't a sense of like I fell asleep and I woke up and I was a new man. It was a long process, but certainly through seeing her, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my mum made in my entire life. Right, she really helped me. But going back to see her regularly was one of the best things I've ever done, and she was just like genuinely life-changing. I look at things so differently now, and I think a lot of that was perspective. I looked at life very, very differently, and I had a lot of bad blood and ill feeling toward a lot of people in my life, and now I look at them and I sort of one of the phrases that stuck out to me is that's their stuff, and that might not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but I think a lot of it comes down to is we hold so much anger and hatred and sad toward people when actually we don't look at it introspectively and go, that's them. That, and if they want to act in a certain way, it's completely down to them. And I think it's learning not to let things affect you as much. And I really did for a long time, and I really took a lot of stuff to heart. Whereas now, certainly through her help and many, many others, is that people that used to bother me now don't, because I can separate myself from them. And if they want to implode and be the nasty sort of narcissistic people that I've surrounded myself with, but actually to separate yourself, actually realise that you're far better off for it, and that you just do your own thing, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's, until you just said it then, that's something I'm awful at. And something my dad always talks to me about as well is I get like really angry over lots of minor things. But those minor things, they just build up and then I blow.
Yeah. And
I think that's something in terms of, it's how they're acting to you, sort of don't let it affect you as much, is I take things to heart. Like that's just my nature, and that's something I'm trying to figure out as well. In terms of hypnotherapy, obviously I've never heard of hypnotherapy, but I might look at it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
What type of other things would you do with? Was it Nikki? Sorry.
Yeah, so Nikki. Yeah,
Nikki.
So she's very much based on like how the brain works, and it's sort of, it's not like a one size fits all policy. People might go there and think it's complete hokey nonsense, but I went in there with not necessarily an open mind, which is why I thought it never worked for me, because a lot of this stuff, like, you can get cured from smoking and drinking by basically falling asleep and someone waving something over your head. It wasn't like that. It was more going in there, her listening to my story, and then giving me perspective on how I saw other people being. And she uses like analogies like, the bully in the playground is often, they're not bullying because they're a nasty person, it's because they've got real demons going on, and it's coming from a place of insecurity. Yeah. And I was a bit like that. I didn't treat people particularly nice at school growing up. It's because I had such massive insecurities in myself, it projected outwardly onto the people, and that came across like I was being a nasty, horrible person. It wasn't. And the people that are often the worst are actually people that just got so much going on themselves. And I think it's just learning to go, the people that are often projecting that onto other people are actually the ones just suffering so badly themselves. Just by separating yourself makes life so much easier.
Yeah, I completely agree with that point. It's I think that's something I struggled with as well, is just your own insecurities, putting them onto people. And one thing that always like sticks out for me is my dad, and anyone could say anything to him and he is just cold-blooded. He's sort of just, he's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's fine. Inside he could be really upset, but he doesn't show it. But if someone does say something bad to him in terms of, you know, a bit on edge, and he's that relaxed head, that person always feels like an idiot afterwards, and is a bit like, oh, why did I raise my
like
voice?
killing with kindness.
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly.
Sort of like,
And he always says to me, he was like, it's the same with your brother, but I think he said it was the same. Yeah, he said it's the same with my brother and him. And when you sort of have an alpha type aura around you, if you act like a beta, but you know you're sort of the alpha inside, people don't know how to handle that. If you're really calm, collected, kind, but inside you still know, you know, this, like, what you could do. He's like, that's a sign of, you know, a good person, not a dangerous person, like physically, but in terms of someone who's in control of their body.
Have you heard of Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, I have heard of Jordan
He's brilliant.
Peterson.
So like one of the things that stuck out to me was when he said every man should have the capability of being a monster, being dangerous. And that's not to say that you go beat people up or like mug someone. It's having the capabilities to be a monster but never having to show it is the best kind of person you can be. Is being cool, calm, collected in those situations, knowing you have the capability to do those things, is that's, he says, what all men should aspire to be. And of course it doesn't work for everyone, but that definitely reminded me of that. Like he's
I suppose said it way better than I could. That's kind of the point I was trying to come across. He's said that to me since I was about 13, 14 when I get really annoyed at stuff, and he was like, just relax, like control the controllables is always something he'd say as well. It's just, now I'm growing up and, you know, my headspace is kind of changing. The more I try to do that, sort of, what I felt like when I'd fight fire with fire, I'd always lose. And like, if it was like coaches or something, or I disagreed with, or someone says something to me, I go bang, I come straight for them. Now being able to sit back, sort of take it in, know what I kind of want to say, but not saying it. Is just, I think that's a sign of maturity as well.
For sure.
But that's something, especially over the last 3 months, I've really tried to work on myself, because I think I pushed away a lot of people growing up by doing that.
Yeah, you and me both.
When I look back at it, and I don't regret it, because it was a good lesson. But I also think, I don't know, I just pushing people away by not being rude, necessarily meaning to be rude, but just going at them, and when I didn't need to, is something that I look back on and do regret. But I think these are all good lessons which I've learned now, and I'm that's, again, what I'm trying to teach to people
100%.
is how to control that. And, you know, there's, like you said, it's not one size fits all. You know, what works for me might not work for you. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. In terms of like, you talked about Jordan Peterson. I think he's great. I don't know his background, but I obviously see little snippets of stuff, and I think it's so important for like young men, especially in today's day and age, to grow up with someone like watching clips of people like that. Another one I think's great is Chris Williamson, and he has his own podcast. He's sort of got a buzz cut. It's American. I think he lives around Texas, but just the way he conducts himself, he's very meticulous in what he does. Gets his point across quickly, and is just very switched on guy. I think these are people that, I don't know, growing up, I don't want to say I didn't have, but I think in terms of role models outside of my family, I don't think there was anyone that I had growing up where I was like, whoa, that's the guy I wanna follow. But now I'm a bit older, I watch a few people conduct themselves, and people speak on podcasts in particular, and it's just, it gives me a bit of hope in terms of, I agree with that stuff. You're coming across really well, and that's how I want to like help people as well, especially the younger people, because I think it's from 13 to 18. That's confusing age.
Tough age,
And I think a lot of people are lost, and a lot of people feel like they don't have a purpose.
Mate, you're spot on. I think coming back to what you were saying earlier about who you follow on a podcast front is young men now, I think, have it a lot harder than we did. I think
Agreed.
they're growing up in a world where being a man is almost shamed, and that they have to behave in certain ways that fit in with the new rhetoric and whatever that may be. And that's really confusing. And I think whilst I'm a complete advocate for women in society, and because growing up with a very female-dominated family, I sort of had to be, and I'm all for that. But men nowadays young men, particularly sort of teenagers growing up, going through sort of puberty into sort of 16 to 18, they've got it really tough because they now don't have a sense of sort of like understanding, and also sort of self-worth, and knowing what it's like to be a man. It sounds really cliche, but being a man is like, it's now lost in translation a little bit with everything that's going on with sort of, I won't go into the politics of they, them, and whatever else. It's really, really tough. So having these male role models like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh, they're all amazing speakers, and they're actually it's not old school at all. It's just basically holding on to those principles that every man should adhere to. And that for me has been amazing to see that there are still out there sort of fighting the good fight and showing young men watching these clips, and these guys are well followed, far more than you or I will be. But it's insane how these guys are having to do that, but they are, and this is some of the times, isn't it? And hopefully the sort of it will level off, and the madness will stop, and it'll come back to how it should be, which is all men should be growing up being told how to behave, but also that they're going to be guys, and they're going to make mistakes along the way, and that it's not being chastised for doing certain actions, which every man will do, right? So that's the way I see it, and these guys are pivotal in that.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
A fact which, I don't know, made me slightly upset when I was doing some research before this was the World Health Organization did a study, and it showed that 1 in 4 people worldwide will experience a mental health issue at some point. And that's obviously a mix of men and women, but a lot of the younger population of men are taking their own lives. And I look back to when I was 16, and I don't think I didn't get to that point where I was like, I want to die, but I was just so heavily depressed. And I think I wrote, again, not plugging it, but I wrote another article on finding my purpose, and how when I found it, it just it was like a breath of fresh air, almost like a weight off my shoulders. And I feel like from COVID and everything, there's all this backlog of people not getting proper uni experiences, and schools not getting a proper end to school, and not making the right set of friends. And for me, when I was at uni, my first year, we were in training for rugby, but there was no one on campus. We trained in how do I say it? Not a sterile environment, like a closed environment.
A bubble,
A bubble. That's it. A bubble. And apart from that, I didn't know anyone at uni, and that was my whole of my first year. Then it gets to second year, and you've got to think, if people have come from overseas and they come in, how are they making friends? And I think it's just destroyed people's mental health, people going to social situations, and I think it's really sad. And I think, as you touched on, having those people that you can sort of look up to, who have those sort of core values, no matter who it is, it could be anyone, just the person you connect with, a person that you think, this is who I want to be like. It's just so important. And I hope I can help someone, and the people I bring on, like yourself, can sort of provide something where they're like, I resonate with that. I love that. I'm going to give it a go, or whatnot. But I feel like, again, when we grew up, and obviously I'm turning 21, and I'm still young, but I think I don't remember people like that growing up, and I touched on it a couple times now, but I just think that's, if I had someone like that when I was 15, 16, I think, would I be in a different headspace to where I was, or in terms of the people around? And, these are things I'm really happy for that, in a way, are going on, and I think it's so important that they are.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I didn't really grow up having sort of suicide, depression, anxiety being talked about, partly because it would have needed to be, for sure, and there's a huge stigma around that. But certainly in this day and age, 10, 15 years have gone since those things happened, and I think 75% of suicide on Earth is men, if not more now. And it's scary how the numbers are just getting more and more and more, and there's no sign of them slowing. And the resources are out there for people, but they're just so overrun that there are year-long waiting lists of people. So if not that you and I are going to go and save the world, but if there are more people out there on a much smaller scale than the people that we talked about is the amount of messages I've had is amazing, but also alarming from people that I had no idea about. And you and I again touched on this before we started filming, is that you would have no idea these people are struggling with something. And I'm sure we'll touch on it in a second, is this that on face value you can really judge someone based on certain things, and that's what we're all guilty of. Since I've started sharing about my story and being sort of almost coming out, as it were, like in terms of my struggles, I think I've probably had several hundred messages from people, men and women, but mostly men, that have gone, I've been suffering in silence for God knows how long, and it's so nice to hear someone that's normal come out and talk about it, which I use the word normal really loosely, because I'm far from it. It's what's the most telling thing for me is how many people are out there. I mean, everyone has mental health, right? We all have bad days. There's just a scale of people that suffer with it far worse and allow it to sort of bother them more than maybe most. So
agreed. And that's something that that really upset me one night. Was I got a DM from someone I had no idea, I won't say his name again. No idea who he was. He was in America. Never heard of him. Must have just seen I put hashtags out on my post. Must have just come through one of them. And he sent me a message, and he was like, "Hey mate, I'm really struggling. I'm struggling, and I don't really know what to do. Do you have any advice? I've just been looking through all your posts, and I've been doing this for a month." And I was just like, a part of me it makes me feel a bit upset now. It's just a bit like, this guy has no idea who I am. I've never met him, and he's reaching out. Like, he must be really struggling.
In a really bad place,
And he just looked like a normal bloke. He had a kid, and I was just a bit like, I don't know. It makes me feel a bit like when I read it, and I was trying to.
That is, you're so unequipped to be able to help him.
Exactly.
All you can do is give him the advice that you've been given, right?
Exactly.
And what you would want to hear.
Yeah, and that's what I did. And I think in terms of depression, and this is a quote I heard from Chris Williamson on his podcast, and this isn't the exact quote, but he was like, men with depression get treated. Men with depression get treated the same as female depression, and that's not what a man wants. In terms of, he wants to feel like he has a purpose. He wants to feel like he can do good in terms of certain things. And I think in a certain aspect, although I'm not qualified enough to talk on this, I think he's right. And I think that's where a lot of people are going wrong, is we have to treat, I didn't want to get, it's all right, it's fine. That made me actually angry. So I get people at school, and everyone would just be trying to help, and they'd be like, "Oh, don't worry, it's okay, we'll do this tomorrow." And I was like, "No, I need someone to just drag me through." And that's what my dad did. And my dad held me accountable, and he let me sulk, he let me do his things, and he never said anything. And this is something my mum as well, it's just I've always respected them massively for, and I couldn't be more grateful. Is they held me accountable for what was going on, and when I wouldn't want to wake up in the morning, they'd go in my room and they'd be like, "Get up, let's go." They wouldn't let me lie in bed till 3 PM as I was before. They'd be in there every day. "Right, let's go, come on." And that's just something it's always stuck with me, is I didn't want to get mummied from it. I didn't want to get, "Oh, don't worry, let's do this tomorrow." I wanted answers. But even though it's nice to get the mummied effect, not really mummied, but it's nice that it's nice to have that. But in terms of getting a cure, or not a cure, but getting better, is I needed someone to drag me through. I felt like I was at the bottom of the ditch trying to scrape out. I needed someone to help me build the ladder to get out, not someone to drag me out so I could fall back in. I needed someone to build that ladder, small steps that I could just climb out and figure it out myself. And that's what they set the foundations for me to do that. And that's why I'm so grateful I'm here today talking about it. And I almost feel guilty in a way talking about it, because I'm not qualified. I don't have a university degree in mental health, but I'm just trying to help people on what's worked for me. And I think that's massively important. It's you need someone to help you build those foundations, or just someone to hold you accountable in those situations. And for me, that was a game changer because I sulked and moped around for a good year before that happened.
The way I was told to compare that, because I always used to say that I wasn't good enough, I didn't have a degree in X, Y, and Z, therefore who am I to talk about it?
Yeah.
And I can't remember who I was talking about it with, but they said, would you rather go to someone who had a degree in cars, who had been a mechanic for 30 years or 20 years and stuff, who'd been working on a number of cars ever since? And I said, well, obviously the mechanic. And he goes, well, the person who's had a degree in cars, who's never owned one, is they know nothing about cars. They would know the bare minimum, as it were, and they would to cover certain bases. But the person who's been under the car, who's changed the oil, who's worked on the engine, they know far more than the person who's got this degree with all these amazing merits to show for it.
Yeah.
So like your personal experiences will help many more people than just say the random person who's got a degree in something that actually haven't been through it.
Yeah.
Which is why, again, I come back to what I was
Such a good analogy.
wanting to become back to being a therapist or a counsellor, is because I've been through that. I'll automatically know not necessarily the right things to say, but certainly for someone who's been through my situations, I'll be able to point them in the right directions on what to do, but also what not to do. Particularly a guy, because men just have this innate ability not to be able to communicate, and that's something that I really want to sort of drive home to particularly young lads, you young boys, and that's where it's most confusing, because boys of a certain age can be confused with just going through puberty and being angry at the world, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Would you say, for me, obviously we spoke on podcast hosts and whatnot, but do you think there's any resources, books, online platforms that you recommend in terms of where people can start? Obviously they can look on social media, and the shorts for me are what helps, like, you know, the 15-second Instagram, TikTok clips. Like, I just find them so good, because I feel like, and this is something I looked at, is talking with Scott and stuff, was for anyone who doesn't know who Scott's behind the camera, but when Scott and I were planning stuff, when the videos are too long, people just don't have the attention span to watch them.
Yeah.
So I did a 15-second clip on TikTok, and it got 6,500 views. Then I did like a 35 or 36-second one, and it got like 2,100 views. And we were like comparing them. We kept doing them, and it was the same outcome every time. And I think those little short snippets are what massively helped me. But also, I suck at reading. And I bought 2 books in. I bought Stolen Focus by Joanne Harry. And that's something I'm trying to read at the moment. And I won't comment on it because I'm not long into it. But he is basically explaining why you feel like you've lost your focus.
Yeah.
And basically what he did was he put his phone away, and he moved away, and he was writing a book. And he basically talks about his lessons on what he found, and, you know, like watching people, and how he felt like he had to grab his phone all the time, but that's not really the case. Like, he didn't have to. There was nothing going on. He felt paranoid. He thought someone was going to die at home if he didn't have his phone. As soon as a message pinged up, I think it was something like in terms of Pavlov's dogs. It's like a psychology study where they I could be so wrong here, but they ring a bell every time there's food, and the dog knows that when that happens, there's food. Yeah. And basically, he's like, when, and there's something my mum spoke about as well, is when that message pings on your phone, you just go like that. You don't even think. You look. And putting that phone away, he didn't know what to do. He felt weird. He felt on edge. And that's kind of how I feel at the moment, is putting my phone away on walks. I just automatically find myself going into my pocket, and then I'm like, I have no phone there. Yeah. And it's stuff like that which I'm finding useful, and I'm going to read obviously a bit more when I've fully read the book. I'll talk about it properly. Yeah. But that book looks amazing, and that's something I'm definitely looking into more in terms of resources and trying to better understand what's going on.
For sure.
Would there be anything on your end in terms of that which you found, or it doesn't have to be anything?
No, I mean, like you, I'm not much of a reader, so I've tried to force myself, particularly when I'm on holiday, to read a bit more than I do. Yeah. And I've got, Karen, the Grey Steers mum, she gives me books every now and again. I'll dip into them every now and again, and a lot of it's mental health based, like Ross Kemp's book, or that kind of, Roman Kemp, sorry. His book was amazing, and he obviously lost his very, very close friend through the radio station and that kind of stuff, which is a pretty tragic story. Roman Kemp's book is one that I want to start. Otherwise, again, attention span thing is the little sort of TikTok videos, little snippets here and there that I find really, really useful. And I got sent, a very good friend of mine, Troy, sent me a video once, it was months ago, on TikTok. I didn't have the app at the time, so I went on the thing, and then due to the algorithm, everything whenever I go on TikTok is usually mental health based, which is no problem for me. I don't mind that. It's either rugby or mental health. It's usually my life.
Similar to mine.
Yeah. So it's every other thing is like a motivational quote or like clips from Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh, that kind of thing. Is that really helps me. And if I am scrolling through social media, I'll often make it sort of proactive if I can, rather than just sort of scrolling through holiday photos, making myself jealous. It's going on those and sort of going down a bit of a rabbit hole of those kind of cool quotes and actually a bit of a motivation. Because often with mental health is, particularly in men, because it's isolation, whereas women come together as a group and they talk about their problems. Men keep themselves, and seeing other people that go through the same thing, because you often feel alone. You often feel like no one's going to understand me. What's the point in talking? Whereas when you see those little quotes or people talking to the camera, if it's you or I or whoever, it's like-minded. They're very much like you are. So it sort of gives you a bit of a boost, thinking actually I'm not alone. I can talk. Like, I'm not a freak. I'm not this loser that no one loves. It's just actually I'm just one in many millions of people. I'm not my own type thing.
Yeah.
For a bit like you.
Yeah, Roman Kemp's from where I'm from, down
okay.
in Chorleywood, and we live very close to his
Really?
mum and dad. So
nice.
Roman Kemp's someone like I speak about quite a lot in terms of like what he's done, and I think it just comes back to a point. It's like he's a DJ on Capital, cool guy, lovely guy, great family, and I think it just comes back to a point like mental health can affect anyone. And it doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter if you're 6'5", doesn't matter if you're 5 foot, doesn't matter if you're a man, you're a woman, anything. It can affect anyone, it can bring anyone to their knees. And I personally like to think I'm quite a tough guy. You know, some would say no, but in terms of that, like in terms of anxiety, depression, ADHD, like it knocked me for six for a long time. And I think people like Sam Thompson as well, he was on Made in Chelsea.
Yeah.
He's just released a program on ADHD, and like his journey on trying to find out why he acts how he acts, and why he sort of makes impulse decisions, and why he's like really like in terms of his thoughts, like why his thoughts are so intrusive, and his relationships with people, and why he's found that hard. And I think that's one thing on my end. Just to touch on quickly with ADHD is like there's a lot of unknown symptoms out there which people have no idea about, which I'll talk about another time. I'll do some Instagram parts on it, but I think that's the most concerning thing is people see mental health problems as like if you're depressed, you know, you're sad. If you've got anxiety, you're stressed. If you've got ADHD, you're hyperactive. Whereas like there's hundreds of things behind the scenes which people don't affiliate with these problems in terms of
there's not a spectrum.
It ruins relationships, you know, it ruins your work schedule, ruins your routines, you know, you struggle getting to sleep. Like I barely sleep. When I do sleep, I sleep for ages because my brain's just so knackered from the day. I struggle getting to sleep. There's all these things, but when everything adds up, you know, like you lose relationships with your friends and stuff like that, when they all add up, that's like how I see it. Not just he's sad, not just he's hyperactive. It's all these behind the scenes stuff which people just don't take in, which I think is raising awareness on that, especially on this podcast, but just in general is crucial in terms of people diagnosing themselves, because a lot of people are self-diagnosing, and also a lot of people are getting diagnosed wrong, which I find crazy. And I saw on LinkedIn this guy went round some of the best clinics. I think he went to Harley Street, I could be wrong. And he said thought he had ADHD and sort of acted like he had ADHD. And they were, all three of the clinics like confirmed he had ADHD and gave him medication, but he knew he didn't have ADHD. And in terms of that, people just got to be really careful in terms of sort of putting a label on themselves as well. And that's why I'm trying to get all this sort of like self-worth type, looking after yourself and like eliminating these symptoms before looking into it a bit more. Because to touch on ADHD as well quickly, I thought for like a few months I didn't have ADHD. I like convinced myself I didn't have ADHD. I was like, oh nah, ADHD is not real. It sounds so stupid, but like I really convinced myself I didn't have it, and I tried doing all these things, and that's when I realised I definitely still have it. But if I didn't try that eliminating thing, I think when I saw he got self-diagnosed, I was like, oh, what if I got self-diagnosed? It makes you doubt yourself. You've really just got to be proactive in what you do with all this stuff, and make sure that it's working well. And you know, it is right, and you're not just self-diagnosing. It's common for young men to not want to talk about their problems, as we do. What advice would you give to someone who's at this stage of not wanting to talk about their problems but knows something going on, or just advice, for a parent who knows that maybe their child is going through something, family friend or a friend who knows going through a problem?
Good question. So if it were me and I was to go through it all again, it's difficult if you've got teenage kids, but from a mother or father, auntie, uncle looking in, seeing their children as behavioural, usually. It's like if they're acting out of character, doing things that are unusual, looking out for sort of behaviour patterns that are slightly against the grain, that's something I'll definitely look forward to, into. And being very gentle with the information you're giving, rather than telling them off and shouting and stuff and being shouted at. It forms a behaviour that they can't open up to their parents if they're being shouted at, and that's in my experiences anyway. Everyone's different, but certainly I think is if you notice one of your friends at school not turning up to school, for example, I mean in your situation is not turning up to school, and you notice that's happening regularly, and there's no sort of health problems behind it, physical health, I mean. Reaching out and encouraging them to speak, and particularly in men, is in my learned experience is that I had loads and loads of friends growing up, but none that I felt close enough to that I could really share with. So the saying is, you don't need loads of friends, just good ones. It's just having a good group of friends around you who are like-minded that you can feel really comfortable opening up to. And girls from a young age are taught to have that, whereas men aren't. They usually like if you're in a team sport, play the sport and then you leave and do your own thing. Is keep a close group around you that you can really hold on to and share things with, which at a young age is difficult.
Agreed. I think that's big for me as well, was realizing I shouldn't share. This was probably a lesson that I learned for me personally, was I shouldn't share everything to everyone. And like you, I had loads of friends growing up who at one point I'd sort of tell everyone to, even people I wasn't close, in terms of like my mental health. Like I didn't talk for ages, and then I found myself like telling people that I shouldn't have told, looking back on, and people that didn't not care, but people that sort of didn't have my best interest at heart.
Or you gain nothing from sharing them with.
And it made me look like a bit of an idiot sharing it with. And I felt like having a tight, my dad says, like an inner circles of people, whether that's friends, family, who you can share things to, my girlfriend. And that's been massive for me. And then sort of keep everyone else as just general, they're your mates, but they're not your circle of people that you trust with your life.
100%. I think lastly as well, and again we'll probably touch on it afterwards, is that if you don't feel comfortable enough to reach out to your friends and family, is either through school and seek help. Like there are so many places out there now, and for me as well, I felt like I couldn't speak to a lot of my friends and family, therefore seeking external advice was the best thing, because seeking therapy can be this huge thing. We think that you're going to be talked to by a shrink and you're going to be told that you're basically going mad. It's not. It's basically having a trusted space within four walls where you can say and do whatever you wish within reason and know that you're not being judged for it. So for me, therapy certainly saved my life. It's a bit dramatic, but like it's certainly, well, maybe it did. Definitely going to therapy definitely saved my life. So
especially talking about stuff.
1,000,000%. It was going to a four-walled space where I knew I could bitch, moan, cry, scream, and I knew that nothing that would leave those four walls, because they were legally bound to. Like it wasn't just that; it was they knew they couldn't tell anyone. And I didn't know that person personally. Therefore, I could go and overshare. I could say whatever I wanted to my family, and knew that I wasn't going to get chastised for saying bad things about my sisters or my mum and my dad, for example, or parents, schools, whatever. So that for me would be the best thing. Is anyone that didn't feel they couldn't trust their family or go to them for anything, is look outside of that. And there's always things you can go down, numbers you can call, or whatever. So that's something I'll definitely recommend.
I'll leave it on this, but
sure.
Is there any particular message of advice that you'd like to share with someone from your personal experience that's going through problems with their mental health at this point in time, or has gone through in terms of lessons you've learned?
For me, is speak early enough, and that a problem shared is a problem halved. I think if you could share early enough, then things will become easier. I think it's just talking. Definitely just talking. Share, talk, and surround yourself with people that you can know and trust. Definitely.
Awesome.